Hey everybody, Off the Mic Wrestling Show YouTube channel here. I want to talk about some discourse that's been going on the internet in regards to two of the higher profile blood feuds going on in major professional wrestling, and that being CM Punk and Drew McIntyre on the WWE side, and Hangman Page and Swerve Strickland in AEW. So I've seen a lot of discourse on the internet saying, oh, which one's better? Oh, burning someone's house is better than breaking a bracelet. Okay, so first of all, that argument alone is very stupid. Okay, arson is better than breaking a bracelet. Like, what are we talking about here? Guys, this is wrestling. This is wrestling. It's all about emotional investment. And in both of these feuds, there is a ton of emotional investment. Let's start with Swerve and Hangman. This goes back a year, almost a calendar year, where it was strictly based on trying to get Swerve Strickland to the next level and him going after Hangman Page's spot. And it got to a personal level where Swerve went into Hangman's house. Hangman went off the deep end to the point where it was his life's goal to screw over Swerve Strickland from reaching Swerve's goal of getting to the top of the mountain. So much so that he deliberately took a pin. Actually, he deliberately tapped out in a triple threat match against Samoa Joe and allowed Samoa Joe to retain just because he didn't want Swerve Strickland to win the title. That is next level haterism. And then Swerve comes back, even though admittedly I would have liked to have seen it be for the World Championship and him win the Owen Hart Cup. I understand why it went to Bryan Danielson. So, listen, like, the level of hatred that those two guys, and I talked about it on my AEW post show right after Dynamite. It's one of the best closing angles that I've ever seen. Not just in AEW, it's one of the best show closers this year. And I wish that AEW had more stories like this that had legitimate heat and, emotional investment in these characters. Because, like, seeing the transition from Hangman Page being this happy-go-lucky, drinking guy who's just happy-go-lucky, happy to be there, drinking with his buddies, and, pleasing to the crowd, doing all this cowboy shit, to the point where he is literally the most disturbed individual, maybe in all of professional wrestling, to the point that he is willing to burn down another man's house. Like, that takes next levels of crazy to get to that point. So, in that respect, yes, the angle of, a guy committing arson is obviously going to be a more powerful image than, a guy breaking a bracelet of a guy's wife and dog on it. But here's the problem, and why I continue to just yell at people on the internet about this whole thing with CM Punk. If you have a problem with the bracelet itself, you are not paying attention. It is what the bracelet means. And CM Punk, if you have paid attention to this guy's career, this guy is usually the type of guy who does not let a lot of things bother him. He does not give a shit. And Drew McIntyre, throughout the storyline, had been the one who had been affected the most, and CM Punk had been in his head. You watch the story. He couldn't hold the world title for 5 minutes at WrestleMania after chasing it for almost a year. Actually, even longer than that. He couldn't handle it for 5 minutes because he wanted to gloat at CM Punk. CM Punk got one up on him. Damian Priest had the briefcase, cashed in, and won the world title there. And from that moment on, Drew McIntyre was chasing CM Punk and this demon in the back of his head. And the one thing that he was able to latch onto, and the weakness in CM Punk, was that bracelet that symbolized the two biggest loves in his life. His wife, AJ Lee, and his dog, Larry. Okay? So, just because it's not a house or something, and it's a bracelet, doesn't mean that it's not as significant. And this is what drives me crazy with tribalism in some of these wrestling feuds. It's like, and you know what, to some degree, I kind of engage in a little bit of tribalism because I just want to point out the facts. And that could be interpreted as tribalism, but I'm trying to point out the obvious in the fact that AEW, in spite of some of these good stories that they're telling, they're few and far between, it's not translating to ratings. And they talk this talk about how they measure up to WWE and how they measure up to being one of the top wrestling companies, and they boast about their talent and all the money that they spend. And yet it doesn't translate to anything. But yet I'm a hater because I just try to point out the facts and the numbers. And that makes me a bad guy. The point is, when it comes to this type of stuff, when it comes to individual stories, I'm just going to say this right away. Both these stories are fucking fantastic. I am really looking forward to this match between Swerve and Hangman, which is now, by the way, a lights out, unsanctioned match inside of a steel cage. So that is absolutely main eventing All Out in Chicago. It should absolutely do that, even if a world title is not on the line. It is not disrespecting Bryan Danielson. It might be disrespecting Jack Perry, but who gives a shit about Jack Perry? So the reality of the situation is, if you want to compare these storylines, you can compare them however you want, but if you're going to just break it down to, oh, arson is better than breaking a bracelet, first of all, that is just a fundamentally stupid argument. You're talking about committing a crime to breaking an object, but it's what the meaning of both of these things were that really made both of these individual things, specifically the Punk segment on Monday, where Drew broke the bracelet. You could hear the audible gasp in the crowd because people are invested in this. They're invested in what this means to a guy like CM Punk, because we haven't seen CM Punk on this level as a human being in terms of, like, you know, tearing him down emotionally. We really haven't seen that side of him. And maybe that's what's rubbing people a lot the wrong way, specifically on the AEW side, because CM Punk, we all know what happened there. But if you look at both of these feuds at face value, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, it's a lot of hatred and a lot of pride on the line, a lot of love going into it, like love for, like, we're talking about Hangman's family, and we're talking about Swerve's family and his childhood home. And then you've obviously got Drew and his family. He gets humiliated in front of his wife and her brother. Right? There's another family members at WrestleMania on the biggest stage by CM Punk. So, like, there's, like, real levels of hatred to all of these things. So both of these can be good. Just because you don't think that a bracelet means as much as arson is not a way to judge these feuds. And so when I see these gifs of, like, oh, a shot of Hangman in front of the burning house of Swerve Strickland, and then CM Punk's bracelet, and saying this is better, one is better than the other, it's like, who cares? Just enjoy stuff. And I've said this in a lot of videos. In spite of what people think of how I feel, because a lot of the content that I put out in relation to AEW is negative, it's only negative because I expect a whole hell of a lot more out of this company, considering how they started and where they were a few years ago, to the point of two of your biggest draws are out the door and in the other place. You're not booking good television. You're booking nothing matches. Nobody really cares. Your attendance is at the lowest point ever. But hey, Wembley Stadium, congratulations, you had something like that happen. But I really hope that they really piggyback off of what is going on with Swerve Strickland and Hangman Page. And I'm not saying that they need to do, like, heat-filled feuds, like, littered across the show where there's arson and there's actual crimes committed, but do more stuff like Mariah May and Toni Storm. Granted, that feud kind of lost some steam because they just have this compulsive need to just schedule matches to get people over. That shouldn't be how it's done. You don't need to have matches. Yes, it is a wrestling show. You don't need to have matches to effectively establish who these characters are. Like, I'd rather have, like, you know, more powerful segments like that contract signing that they had. Or CM Punk, you know, getting blindside attacked when he thinks he's moving off of Drew McIntyre and he gets kicked literally out of his shoes. I'd rather have physical segments like that than actual guys getting in the ring, because then that's going to make these emotional conclusions and these matches, like a steel cage match at All Out, mean a hell of a lot more. Or what I think is going to happen, a Hell in a Cell match between CM Punk and Drew McIntyre at Bad Blood. So, long story short, like I said, I enjoy both of these feuds. I think everybody else should enjoy both these feuds. If you want to nitpick about little things like, oh, a bracelet doesn't mean as much as burning down a house, or if you want to say, oh, they didn't actually burn down Swerve's house, they didn't use the right address or whatever, or it was fake, or it was CGI, come on, guys. It's wrestling. Just enjoy it. Have a good time. The other stuff in terms of, like, why I kind of, you know, mention AEW a lot on this channel is because I want it to do well. It's constructive criticism. And when I see the numbers that I see from AEW, in spite of great segments like this one that ended Dynamite going into a pay-per-view, it pisses me off. Because they should be so much better with the level of talent and the amount of money that Tony Khan is using as resources, but everybody just wants to give them a pat on the back because, hey, we put 50,000 people in a stadium in England for the second year in a row. Oh, great. That's great. But hey, constructive criticism. You had 75,000 to 80,000 people in that stadium 1 year ago. What happened? Again, I'm trying to be fair, but also I have to be critical and I have to be honest when I look at the numbers, and when people who are tribalist and cultist in this will trumpet out all of this stuff and talk about this segment, which, yes, it was great. Why is the rest of the show significantly mid compared to what ended Dynamite this week? Because for every, complaint that you want to have about CM Punk and Drew McIntyre, that's not the only hot feud that's going on in WWE. Judgment Day versus Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley. Yes, Judgment Day has been losing a lot, but there is a ton of heat behind that. Rhea Ripley is as good as there is in the company. I mean, you've obviously got Cody Rhodes with the Bloodline, that potentially heating up. Roman Reigns is going to be back anytime soon. Like, WWE gets you invested in these characters. That's why they're filling up buildings. That's why they're having as good of merch and as good television ratings and gates and going to international shows in places like Berlin, Germany. That's why they're doing so well. So if there's anything any piece of advice that I could give to AEW is, one, don't settle for just being great in certain spots. Do inspire yourself to go back to your roots, because there was a lot of really good storytelling in early AEW. You had Hangman and Kenny Omega early on. That was great. You had Cody and MJF. You had CM Punk and MJF. You had early Chris Jericho and the Inner Circle versus the Pinnacle. Like, early AEW had a lot of really good stories. What the fuck happened to that? It's like they've totally lost sight of where they were in the beginning, and they're just focused on, like, pleasing everybody, and, like, if anybody wants to give them constructive criticism, like a CM Punk, they get rattled, and they cower up, and they get petty, and they air footage from a show a year ago. It's just, that's the sign of a weak-minded company and a weak-minded owner who, after initially being praised early in the stages, and the reason why AEW got off to such a great start is because WWE was hot garbage from 2019 to 2022. Like, there was moments within that in late 2019 to 2022 when Vince McMahon ultimately retired and was instantly distanced from the company. There was definitely some bright spots, but it's not as good as it's been under Triple H. And AEW benefited from just a massive, just negativity and just, general dissatisfaction with the WWE product in general. And then COVID happened, so it delayed things a little bit. And then coming out of the pandemic, they were able to, sign a lot of high-profile names like a CM Punk, like a Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson. And that gave them a lot of energy. And then, again, I keep pointing to this. In 2022, Cody Rhodes leaves. That is, your heart and soul, and, you're really, your glue that held that thing together. And I don't think he is going to ever get nearly enough credit for being really a lot of the backbone and the glue that held that thing together. Because if he were there, none of this shit with CM Punk would ever happen. And who's to say that CM Punk would not still be in AEW at this point if Cody Rhodes were still there? But I don't think he gets nearly enough credit, and that's part of the problem too. And people don't want to acknowledge that because, again, AEW has gone to just the point of, hey, we're an independent wrestling company with a WWE style budget. Tony Khan can get any wrestler he wants in the world. It's not going to mean anything if you don't make us care about these characters. And they're trying and not succeeding with stars like Mercedes Moné. They're doing a really good job with Will Ospreay. I think Kazuchika Okada is just, cashing checks. And, we'll see what happens with Ricochet. Like I said, he literally got there 2 weeks ago. And he didn't even make Dynamite the second week he's there. If that's an indication of how things are there, they have no control over how they book things there. They don't have a handle of it. So, but again, it just all goes back to the main point of this video, which is, stories. And I don't like it when we're barking back and forth when it comes to, which storyline is better. Oh, the top storyline in AEW is better than the top storyline in WWE. Guys, again, the main thing that I need to hammer home is we should have more storylines that have a ton of heat behind this, that we're talking about them. And I feel that AEW doesn't do enough of them. And that's why they're in the place that they're at. So, thanks for watching this video. Subscribe to the channel here at OT Mike Wrestling. Follow for show content on Twitter at OT Mike Wrestling as well. And follow me at OffTheMic28 if you want to hear some of not just my wrestling takes, but sports takes as well. Appreciate the love and support. And we'll have a lot of great content. Obviously, All Out is on Saturday, so that'll be very exciting. A very interesting card there. They've been able to do a decent enough job. And again, like I said, I am so pumped for Hangman and Swerve. I think this is Hangman Swerve 4, I think, that they were doing. And if this cage match is anything like the match that they had in LA, where Hangman was drinking Swerve's blood, it's going to be just an all-timer. So, but yeah, exciting time here on the channel, exciting time in wrestling. Thanks again for the support, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.